Army Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl is now safely out of Afghanistan after 5 long years as a prisoner of the Taliban. Just hours ago, he landed at a U.S. military base in Germany where he will receive medical care.
Now, it is unclear when exactly he will reunite with his parents, Janny and Bob, who appeared with the president in the Rose Garden just hours after learning that at long last their son is finally free. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Bergdahl's hometown in Idaho, they're getting ready to welcome him back with signs and yellow balloons all over town. Of course, this was a town that never gave up hope that he would come back.
And this morning, social media abuzz over the release. Bergdahl, the #1 trending topic on Twitter, with words like wow, hooray, and welcome home. And we have team coverage this morning of what is a developing story. And we start with ABC News Chief Global Affairs Correspondent Martha Raddatz, who's in Washington. Martha, good morning.
Good morning, Dan. This was a dramatic rescue, 5 years in the making, all carefully orchestrated with Bergdahl's captors.
This morning, speaking from Afghanistan, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said that Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl's health was deteriorating and his life might have been in jeopardy.
My name is Bowe Bergdahl.
The Army sergeant was released by his Taliban captors after 5 years in a prisoner swap. 1 American citizen for 5 Afghan Taliban being held at the Guantanamo Bay military prison in Cuba for over a decade. The president speaking about the end of Bergdahl's captivity alongside his parents in the White House Rose Garden.
He wasn't forgotten by his community in Idaho, and he wasn't forgotten by his country, because the United States of America does not ever leave our men and women in uniform behind.
Bergdahl was picked up by U.S. Special Operations Forces from his captors on Saturday. Not a single shot fired. The noise from the helicopter so loud he was handed a pen to scribble SF for Special Forces. The soldiers yelling back, yes, adding, "We've been looking for you for a long time." Bergdahl then broke down in tears. Recovered along the border with Pakistan, defense sources tell ABC News overnight Bergdahl was en route from Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan to a military hospital in Germany, where he will undergo evaluation and treatment before being reunited with his family. According to the Defense Department, then Private First Class Bergdahl was abducted in June 2009 after going missing from his post at a U.S. base in Afghanistan. Since his disappearance, rumors have swirled about how the sergeant left the base, from walking off the job to being grabbed from a latrine.
It is very unnerving to be a prisoner.
The Taliban quickly claimed credit for the abduction, and in early proof-of-life videos, Bergdahl was shown answering questions and eating, insisted that he was being treated well, even doing push-ups to show he was in good shape.
As you can see, strong, physically fit.
But it has been 4 long years since the last video was released, showing the toil of years in isolation had begun to take its toll.
Every day I want to go home. The pain in my heart to see my family again doesn't get any smaller. Get me, release me, please. I'm begging you, bring me home.
And while everyone is happy that Bergdahl is safe, the administration is already being criticized, with Congressman Mike Rogers saying, "I am extremely troubled that the United States negotiated with terrorists. I believe this decision will threaten the lives of American soldiers for years to come." Dan and Bianna?
This deal remains controversial. Martha, let me just follow up here. Secretary Hagel, when he spoke to reporters just hours ago, he ducked a question on this. But is Bergdahl likely to face some punishment if it's proven that he deserted here?
Well, I think they will certainly look at the circumstances of his disappearance and captivity. But I imagine even if they say he deserted, that they will look at his mental health at the time that happened. And certainly 5 years in captivity is a long time to be held no matter what happened.
Let me ask you quickly about this prisoner swap. What does history tell us about releasing prisoners from Gitmo? Do they generally return to their job of trying to fight us?
Well, they certainly have in the past, Dan. Not everyone, but there is certainly a record of recidivism, of going back to terrorism or going back to the Taliban or going back to wherever they started out. They will be carefully watched in Qatar for a year, but after that, I imagine the United States will try to keep an eye on them as well. But that is part of the controversy this morning as well, Dan.
Thank you, Martha. And Bianna, over to you.
Dan, thanks. Meantime, this morning we are learning more about the detainees swapped for Sergeant Bergdahl. There are 5 top Taliban leaders at the prison. And ABC's Mohammed Leela has more from Islamabad, Pakistan. Mohammed.
Well, good morning, Bianna, from here in Pakistan. Of course, this is where U.S. officials believe Sergeant Bergdahl spent most of his captivity. And his release did come at a very high price. 5 Taliban leaders, all of them battle-hardened commanders, are now free. The biggest name among them, a man by the name of Mullah Muhammad Fazl. He was the Taliban's former army chief. A U.S. Army report once declared him high risk, saying that if he was released, he would, quote, likely rejoin the Taliban. Another of the detainees, Abdul Haq Wasik, reportedly had direct access to Taliban leader Mullah Omar, even using his own home as a safe house for other militants. All 5 detainees are now in Qatar, the tiny Middle East nation that helped broker this prisoner swap. And they're all facing a travel ban, meaning they won't be allowed to leave that country and certainly not return to Afghanistan for at least a year. Already, President Obama is facing heavy criticism from Republicans who accuse him of violating a long-standing U.S. policy to not negotiate with terrorists. And in this case, these are 5 men who, once that travel ban is lifted, could very easily go back to endangering more American lives. Bianna.
And yet, clearly, this was a risk the president was willing to take. Mohammed, thank you.
Army Sergeant Bowe